Hey everyone, it's your boy Alex from VanVentures here, kicking off another epic weekend escape. If you're new to the channel, buckle up. I'm that guy who traded a soul-crushing corporate desk job for the ultimate freedom hack, van life. Back in my early 20s, I was grinding away as a graphic designer in Seattle, staring at screens all day, dreaming of mountains and open skies. One layoff later, I sold most of my crap, bought this beat-up 2015 Ford Transit for a steal on Craigslist, and converted her into my rolling home base. Named her Bertha after my grandma, she's tough, reliable, and full of surprises. Inside, I've got a full setup, a queen-size bed platform over storage drawers crammed with camping gear, a tiny sink with a foot pump faucet hooked to a 20-gallon water tank, a 2-burner propane stove for whipping up gourmet ramen, and those solar panels on the roof charging my batteries for lights, fridge, and drone. No more rent, no more traffic jams, just me, the road, and whatever adventure calls. These days, I fund the dream with a part-time gig at the Daily Grind, this cozy coffee shop in downtown Bellingham, Washington. It's right by the bay, with views of the San Juans on clear days, and the regulars are chill, mostly college kids from Western Washington University and hikers prepping for the Cascades. I sling lattes, pour-overs, and chat up customers about their weekend plans, all while plotting my own escapes. Today was a classic Friday shift. Started at 9 a.m. with the morning rush, foam art on cappuccinos, dealing with that one Karen who always wants her mocha extra hot but not too hot. By 5 p.m., I was clocked out, wiping down the espresso machine one last time and waving goodbye to my coworker Mia. "Have a wild one, Alex," she yelled as I headed out. The rain had been pounding all week, typical Pacific Northwest gloom, but it finally tapered off to a misty drizzle, leaving everything smelling fresh and earthy. I tossed my apron in the passenger seat, threw my backpack into the back with the rest of my gear, sleeping bag, tent, drone, extra batteries, and a cooler of snacks, and fired up Bertha's engine. She rumbled to life with that familiar diesel growl, and I hit record on the GoPro suction cupped to the dash, its little red light blinking like an excited heartbeat. "All right, fam," I said into the camera, flashing my signature grin and adjusting my beanie. "We're ditching the city and heading out for some serious off-the-grid vibes this weekend." I've been obsessed with this spot I found while scrolling Reddit's r/abandoned porn and watching old YouTube explorers. Monte Cristo, an old mining ghost town from the late 1800s up in the Snohomish County Cascades. Back in the day, it was a booming hub for gold and silver prospectors, with thousands of folks flocking there during the rush. They built a whole town, hotels, saloons, even a railroad to haul ore out. But floods, fires, and the mines drying up turned it into a total bust by the 1920s. Now it's just eerie ruins, crumbling log cabins, rusted mining equipment, and that classic abandoned feel. No cell service for miles, no crowds, just potential ghosts and killer drone shots over the peaks. I read it's about an 80-mile drive from here, but the last bit's a hike, since floods washed out the old roads in the early 2000s. Perfect for a solo campout and some spooky content. Who's hyped? Smash that like button if you're coming along virtually, and drop your favorite ghost town stories in the comments. I pulled out of the parking lot, merging onto I-5 South with the late afternoon traffic, mostly commuters heading home from Bellingham or up from Seattle. The sun was dipping low, breaking through the clouds in golden rays that turned the Puget Sound into a shimmering canvas of oranges, pinks, and deep blues. Ferries chugged across the water toward the islands, and I could see the outline of the Olympics in the distance, snow-capped even in September. I narrated the whole thing, of course. "Look at that view, guys. This is why I do van life. No boss breathing down my neck, no alarm clocks on Saturday, just me, Bertha, and the horizon calling." Bellingham's been my base for 6 months now. Love the craft beer scene and the proximity to killer trails, but nothing beats hitting the road. Traffic was light for a Friday, and I cruised at a steady 65, windows cracked to let in the salty breeze off the Sound. Passed through Mount Vernon with its tulip fields, then Marysville, where things started feeling more suburban. About an hour in, I veered east off I-5 onto Highway 92, heading toward Granite Falls. The road narrowed, trading freeway for 2-lane blacktop winding through farmland and thickening forests. Evergreens loomed taller, the air growing cooler and pine-fresh as I climbed into the foothills. Switching gears now, squad, leaving the interstate for the real adventure roads, I vlogged, panning the camera to catch a glimpse of the Skagit River rushing alongside. Stopped once at a pullout near Lake Stevens to stretch my legs, chug some water, and film a quick clip. Hour one down, feeling the vibes already. Grabbed a coffee to go from work. Pro tip, always snag the employee discount on road fuel. Munched on a protein bar, double-checked my offline maps on the phone since signal was already getting patchy, and pushed on. From Granite Falls, it was on to the Mountain Loop Highway, a scenic byway that's equal parts stunning and sketchy. Asphalt gave way to gravel in spots, potholes jarring Bertha's suspension as we bounced along. The forest closed in, massive Douglas firs and cedars blocking out the fading light, with glimpses of the Stillaguamish River churning below. Deep in the woods now, folks, no other cars for miles. This stretch hasn't seen serious maintenance since, like, the Clinton era, but Bertha's handling it like a champ. Those all-terrain tires I splurged on last month, worth every penny. The solar panels rattled on the roof with each bump, and I kept an eye on the dash for any warning lights. Van life rule number 1, preventive maintenance or bust. By dusk, the air had turned crisp and invigorating, laced with that unmistakable mountain scent of damp earth and conifers. I'd climbed to around 2,000 feet, the temperature dropping into the low 50s. Pulled over once more at a viewpoint to stretch and grab another quick clip. Hour 2, and we're officially off the grid. Sun setting behind the peaks. Check out those alpenglow hues. Feels like the edge of the world up here. I wolfed down the rest of my protein bar, consulted the map app one last time, and continued to Barlow Pass, where the road ends for vehicles. The Ghost Town Trail starts there, but like I thought, Bertha couldn't cross the washed-out sections. Flood damage from 2003 and 2006 turned the old mining road into a hiking path only. So I parked her in a secluded spot off the shoulder, locked up tight, and shouldered my backpack with the essentials: tent, sleeping bag, cooking kit, drone, tripod, and enough food for a couple days. Huffing up the overgrown path, about 4 miles of mostly flat but root-strewn trail with a few steep switchbacks, backpack slung over one shoulder and tripod in hand, I filmed the approach, my breath fogging in the cooling air. The trail followed the old railroad grade, with remnants of ties and spikes poking through the underbrush. Okay, adventurers, we're going old school now, hiking the last leg since the floods took out the bridges. Monte Cristo, here we come. Legend has it this place boomed with thousands of silver and gold miners back in the day, complete with a fancy hotel and even electricity from a hydroelectric plant. Then the ore veins tapped out, finances collapsed, and poof, ghost town by the 1930s. Now it's just crumbling cabins, rusted machinery, and maybe some lingering spirits. Prime spooky content for the channel. Stay tuned for tomorrow's explorers. As the trail leveled out and I crested the final ridge, the last slivers of daylight were slipping behind the jagged peaks of the North Cascades, casting long, eerie shadows that stretched like fingers across the valley below. There it was, Monte Cristo, sprawled out in a narrow gorge along the dried-up bed of what I knew from my research was 76 Creek, a tributary of the South Fork Sauk River. The air up here at about 2,700 feet felt thinner, sharper, laced with the faint metallic tang of old rust and decaying wood. No wonder this place drew prospectors back in 1889 when Joseph Pearsall and Frank Peabody struck silver and gold ore in these hills. It must have seemed like a promised land, tucked away in this remote pocket of Snohomish County. By the early 1890s, thousands flooded in, building a bustling town with over 200 claims staked, a 5-story concentrator mill to process the ore, boarding houses, a school, and even a fancy hotel called the Big 4 Inn. They hauled in a railroad in 1893, the Everett and Monte Cristo Railway, to ship out the riches. But floods, avalanches, and the veins running dry turned it all to bust by the 1920s. Fires and time did the rest, leaving it a true ghost town since the 30s, with the U.S. Forest Service overseeing the ruins now as part of the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. The silence hit me like a wall. No birds chirping their evening songs, no rustle of wind through the alder and hemlock trees that crowded the slopes, just the solitary crunch of my boots on the gravel-strewn path. It was unnerving, like the whole place was holding its breath. The buildings, maybe a dozen or so still standing in various states of collapse, sagged under roofs thick with moss and ferns. Their weathered wooden walls splintered and grayed by decades of harsh winters. I spotted the remnants of the old tramway cables dangling from rusted towers, and scattered mining carts half buried in overgrowth, their wheels seized with corrosion. The main street, really just a wide, rutted trail, wound between them, flanked by foundation pits where saloons and stores once stood, now choked with nettles and devil's club. I paused to catch my breath, the weight of my pack digging into my shoulders, and pulled out the GoPro again. "Whoa, squad, check this out," I whispered into the lens, panning slowly. "We've made it to Monte Cristo. You can almost feel the history here, the boomtown energy gone quiet. That over there looks like the skeleton of the concentrator building where they'd crush and sort the ore. And those cabins probably housed the miners who toughed out -20-degree winters. No one's lived here permanently in almost a century, but it feels alive in a creepy way. Gonna set up camp and soak it in." I chose a spot in what I figured was the foundation of an old saloon, crumbling stone walls about knee-high, with charred timbers hinting at a long-ago fire, and a flat, cleared area big enough for my tent. It was central, right off the main path, with a view down the creek bed where the railroad once ran. In my mind, I imagined popping open Bertha's sliding side door, unfolding the awning for that instant home vibe, but reality check. I was on foot, having left her parked safely back at Barlow Pass. No worries, I'd haul the essentials, my lightweight two-person tent, my down sleeping bag rated for sub-freezing temps, a Jetboil stove, and a bear canister for food, just in case wildlife got curious. Pitched the tent in under 5 minutes, staking it down against the rocky soil, then gathered some dry twigs and branches from the underbrush for a small fire. Built it in a ring of stones I'd scavenged from the creek bed, safety first, even in a ghost town. The flames flickered to life with a match, crackling softly as I set up the Jetboil, pouring in water from my Nalgene and dropping in a packet of beef ramen. The savory steam rose up, mixing with the wood smoke, and for a moment it felt downright cozy, like any other backcountry camp. Day 1 wrap-up, I vlogged, holding the camera at arm's length with the fire's warm glow illuminating my face, embers popping in the background like tiny fireworks. Settled in at Monte Cristo after that 4-mile hike, legs are feeling it, but worth it for this setup. Pitched in the ruins of what might have been the town's saloon. Can you imagine the rowdy nights here back in the gold rush days? Miners throwing back whiskey after 12-hour shifts underground. Tomorrow, I'll fire up the drone for aerials over the old mine shafts and maybe hunt for artifacts. Nothing valuable, just cool relics for the gram, like old bottles or nails. Gotta respect the leave no trace rules, though. Night's falling fast up here. Temps are dropping quick, but the stars? Insane without any light pollution. Milky Way's gonna be poppin'. If you're watching this, drop a comment. What's the spookiest place you've camped? Sweet dreams, squad. Alex out. I killed the camera, uploaded the clip to my phone's storage for later editing, and scarfed down the noodles straight from the pot, the salty broth warming me from the inside out. Cleaned up, doused the fire with water until it was cold to the touch, Wildfire Prevention 101, and brushed my teeth with a splash from my bottle, spitting into the bushes. Crawled into the tent, zipping up the rainfly against the encroaching chill, and inflated my sleeping pad with a few breaths. Slid into the bag, fully clothed in my base layers and fleece, and pulled out my phone. No bars, as expected, so I queued up some offline podcasts, episodes of Stuff You Should Know I'd downloaded back in Bellingham, stuff about abandoned places and urban legends to fit the mood. Lay there listening to the hosts drone on about Chernobyl, my eyes getting heavy as the exhaustion from the drive, hike, and setup finally caught up. The tent fabric rustled faintly in a light breeze that had picked up, but otherwise, the silence wrapped around me like a blanket. Sleep came easy at first, pulling me under into that deep, dreamless void of a tired adventurer. But then, whispers. They crept in around midnight, I guessed. I didn't have my watch to check, but the moon was high through the tent mesh. At first, I dismissed it as the wind rustling leaves in the cottonwoods down by the creek, or maybe an audio glitch in my fading podcast. But no, the earbuds were out, phone off. These were distinct voices, low and murmuring, like a crowd huddled just outside the dying firelight, their words slurred and overlapping in an accent that I couldn't quite make out. Fresh one, smells good, been too long. A giggle pierced through, high and wrong, like a child's but twisted with something feral, echoing off the ruined walls. I sat up, bolt upright, heart picking up speed from 0 to 60, pounding in my ears as adrenaline surged. Straining to listen, I held my breath, every muscle tensed. Was it hikers? Squatters? My mind raced. Monte Cristo was supposed to be empty, but maybe some thru hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail detour or weirdos living off-grid. I unzipped the tent flap a crack, just enough to peer out without making noise. The fire had died to glowing embers, casting long, wavering shadows over the ruins. Nothing. Just the empty streets, pitted with puddles from earlier drizzle, and those boarded-up windows on the surviving cabins staring back like dead, unblinking eyes. Voids swallowing the moonlight. Shook it off as imagination, ghost town vibes getting to me, amplified by the podcasts and the isolation, and lay back down, forcing slow breaths to calm my pulse. Probably just paranoia. I'd read too many Reddit threads about haunted spots. Zipped the flap shut, burrowed deeper into the bag. But then came the scratching. Nails on wood, or claws, slow and deliberate, dragging along the exterior of a nearby ruin. Then closer, circling my tent like a predator testing boundaries. It rasped against the nylon fabric once, lightly, sending a shiver down my spine. My breath caught in my throat, shallow and ragged. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking more than I'd admit on camera, echoing faintly into the night. No answer, but the scratching stopped abruptly, leaving a heavier silence. Replaced seconds later by footsteps, soft, padding ones, not boots, but bare feet or moccasins. Multiple sets shuffling through the gravel, closing in from different directions, deliberate and unhurried. Panic surged through me like a freight train barreling off its tracks, slamming into my chest and squeezing the air from my lungs in one brutal instant. My mind fragmented into pure instinct. Survive, run, escape this nightmare that had morphed from eerie solitude into something primal and monstrous. I fumbled blindly in the dark confines of the tent, my fingers trembling as they clawed at the zipper of my backpack, finally latching onto the headlamp. Click! The beam pierced the blackness like a desperate lifeline, illuminating the thin nylon walls that suddenly felt as flimsy as tissue paper against whatever lurked outside. I exploded out of the tent in a frenzy, the zipper ripping open with a snarl, my boots kicking up gravel as I spun wildly, sweeping the light across the ruins. Eyes. Dozens of them, glowing back at me with that sickly reflective sheen like feral cats in the night. But these weren't animals. They belonged to human shapes, pale, gaunt figures skulking in the shadows between the dilapidated buildings, their forms twisted and emaciated, skin stretched taut over protruding bones like living mummies unearthed from some cursed tomb. Ragged scraps of clothing hung off their skeletal frames, faded flannel shirts torn at the seams, pants caked in mud and what looked like dried blood, feet bare and calloused, blackened with filth from years of prowling these forsaken woods. Their hair was matted and wild, eyes sunken deep into hollow sockets that burned with a hunger that wasn't just for food, but for something deeper, more depraved. These weren't ghosts haunting Monte Cristo's history. They were the living remnants. Descendants, perhaps, of those long-forgotten miners who'd starved through brutal winters, driven mad by isolation and famine until they turned on each other. Or maybe outsiders who'd stumbled here over the decades, warped by the town's dark legacy into this cannibal clan, surviving on the flesh of the unwary. One of them stepped forward into the edge of my headlamp's beam, a woman, or what was left of one, with stringy, grease-slicked hair dangling like rotten vines over her ashen face. Her lips peeled back in a grotesque smile, revealing jagged teeth filed to points, stained yellow and red with God knows what residue. "Visitor," she hissed, her voice a dry rasp like rustling paper caught in a grave wind, carrying the fetid stench of decay on her breath. "Fresh meat wanders in. Stay for dinner. We've got room at the table." Her words slithered into my ears, laced with a mocking glee that sent ice shards down my spine. Behind her, the others shifted, low chuckles bubbling up from their throats, a chorus of madness that echoed off the crumbling walls. I didn't think. I bolted, snatched my backpack in one fluid, terror-fueled motion, the GoPro still clutched in my white-knuckled fist like a talisman, and sprinted toward the trailhead, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might shatter them. The cold mountain air burned in my lungs, each breath a ragged gasp as I pounded through the gravel, dodging the skeletal remains of old mining carts that loomed like traps in the dark. Behind me, the laughter erupted fully now, wild, unhinged cackles that split the night, morphing into whoops and howls that sounded less human and more like a pack of deranged hyenas closing in for the kill. Their feet, unnaturally fast, pattering with a rhythmic, predatory grace, crashed through the underbrush, branches snapping like bones under their pursuit. They were everywhere, flanking me, their shadows darting in my peripheral vision, closing the net. Branches whipped across my face like razor lashes, drawing hot lines of blood that stung in the chill air. I tripped over gnarled roots, twisting up from the earth like skeletal hands grabbing at my ankles, slamming to the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of me. But I scrambled up each time, dirt grinding into my palms, breath coming in panicked wheezes. "What the fuck? What the fuck?" I gasped out loud, my voice a hoarse whisper lost in the chaos, as I fumbled with numb fingers to hit record on the GoPro. The red light flickered on. If I died here, at least the footage would capture this hell, a final vlog from the grave. Proof that Monte Cristo wasn't abandoned, but a lair for these abominations. A rock sailed past my head with a deadly whistle, cracking against a tree trunk like a gunshot, splintering bark inches from my ear. Then another connected with my shoulder, the impact exploding like fire through my muscles, nearly spinning me off my feet. Pain lanced down my arm, hot and electric, but I pushed through, realizing with gut-wrenching dread that they weren't just chasing, they were hurting me, driving me deeper into the heart of the town instead of out toward the trail, like wolves funneling prey into a kill zone. The path I'd taken twisted wrong. The ruins grew denser, the air thicker with the scent of damp rot and something metallic, like old blood. I veered left in blind desperation, dodging into what my headlamp revealed as an old mine entrance, a yawning black maw framed by rotting timbers, dripping with moisture that gleamed like saliva. But it was a dead end. The tunnel collapsed 20 feet in, a wall of rubble blocking any escape. No, wait, a side path, overgrown with thorns and vines that clawed at me like living tendrils. I plunged down it, the brambles tearing at my jeans, ripping fabric and skin alike, warm blood trickling down my legs as I fought through the tangle. That's when I stumbled out of the thicket into the clearing, a hidden hollow nestled behind the main ruins, a place no trail maps or Reddit threads had mentioned, probably their secret den. My headlamp beam swung wildly as I caught my balance, illuminating horror beyond comprehension. Piles of belongings towered like macabre trophies around a massive fire pit dug deep into the earth, its edges charred black from countless blazes. Backpacks of every brand, Osprey, North Face, REI, stacked haphazardly, zippers gaping open to spill out clothes, wallets, phones with cracked screens, keys to vehicles long since scavenged. Tents shredded and bloodstained, hiking boots with laces gnawed through, personal items that screamed of lives interrupted, a child stuffed bear, a wedding ring glinting in the ash, passports from far-flung countries. These were the remnants of dozens, maybe hundreds of wanderers like me, hikers, explorers, van lifers, drawn by the allure of abandonment, never to be heard from again. But worse, infinitely worse, the bones. Human bones scattered amid the ashes like discarded refuse, femurs cracked open for marrow, rib cages splintered and charred, vertebrae strung together in grotesque necklaces hanging from nearby branches. Skulls, oh God, the skulls, piled in a corner, their empty sockets grinning up at me with eternal, mocking leers. Teeth marks etched into the bone where flesh had been stripped away. And in the center, dominating the pit like an altar to some hellish god, a massive spit forged from rusted mining rods, slowly rotating over smoldering coals even now. Dangling from hooks along its length were remnants of meat, human limbs half gnawed and blackened, fingers curled in rigor mortis pleas, a thigh with muscle flayed back to expose the bone, glistening with fat that dripped into the fire with sickening sizzles. The air reeked of it all, acrid smoke mingled with the sweet sick rot of decomposition, the metallic tang of blood, and an underlying char of cooked flesh that twisted my stomach into knots. I retched violently, dropping to my knees in the dirt, bile burning my throat as vomit splattered the ground, my body convulsing in revulsion. They'd been here all along, lurking in the shadows of this forsaken place since the mining days, perhaps starting with desperate acts during those starvation winters of the 1890s, when blizzards cut off supplies and men turned to the unthinkable. Survivors, descendants, a twisted cult perpetuating the cycle, luring modern travelers with the myth of a harmless ghost town. Eating them to sustain their wretched existence, keeping the gear to erase any trace, no missing persons reports leading back, no vehicles found, just whispers of vanishings in the Cascades. My van, Bertha, parked miles away. They'd find her too, strip her for parts, add her solar panels and cozy interior to their hoard, another trophy in this graveyard of dreams. Footsteps closed in now, faster, their hungry cries piercing the night, guttural snarls and ecstatic yips that promised agony before the end. I scrambled up, terror fueling every cell in my body like rocket fuel, and ran blind into the enveloping darkness, thorns and rocks be damned, their ravenous howls echoing behind me like a death knell. If I make it out! But the camera's rolling, capturing the blur of my flight, the screams closing in. Tell my story, warn the world, don't come here, ever.